welcome you to the TU College of Law 2009 Alumnus in Residence Luncheon. I am Janet Levitt. I'm the Dean of the TU College of Law, and it's my sincere pleasure to welcome you here today as we honor our distinguished speaker. In a short while, as dessert is served, I will introduce Attorney General Edmondson. So today, we honor one of the TU College of Law's most distinguished alumni. However, before I introduce him, I just want to welcome here today our students, our faculty, several administrators throughout the university, our alumni. There's several judges of all different levels, and friends of the law school. If I listed all of you, you wouldn't be able to hear from our distinguished guests. So I think I just want to say collectively, thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you so much for supporting the law school and the university. This university has just made tremendous strides in the past decade, and the law school is right there with it, and I'm very, very proud to be here with all of you right now. So those of you who were students or alumni may recall a very beloved professor here who retired last year, Professor John Hicks. And what many of you might not know about John Hicks is he was really a historian at heart. In fact, he wrote the history of TU Law School. And he says that all great institutions, in order to be a great institution, you have to have a sense of your own history. And our Alumnus in Residence program is one way to facilitate sharing our very rich history with our current faculty, students, and friends. It gives our distinguished alumni a forum to share how their experience at TU has shaped their personal and professional lives, and it allows us to better appreciate the rich history of this institution and the many successes the future holds for the college and for our law school family. And so now I'd like to recognize our guest of honor, the Attorney General of the State of Oklahoma, the Honorable W.A. Drew Edmondson. Every law school is brimming with talented students who work hard to achieve their personal and professional goals, and so many of those students that are currently enrolled are here today. But every few years, a student arrives who clearly distinguishes himself or herself from even the most gifted peers. And such is the case with Drew Edmondson. Drew began his 32-year law career in 1976 when he gave up his seat in the Oklahoma House of Representatives to enter law school at the University of Tulsa College of Law. He proved his dedication to entering the legal profession by commuting daily from Muskogee to attend law school, and all the while seeking balance in his work and family life. A few of my veteran colleagues who are also political junkies, like many of you in the room, including Drew, recall Drew's perseverance in obtaining his law degree and enjoyed immensely hearing his tales about his legendary political family, including his father, Congressman Ed Edmondson, and his uncle, Governor and U.S. Senator J. Howard Edmondson. Following his graduation, he spent 10 years as Muskogee County District Attorney and served one term on the Oklahoma legislature. He was first elected Oklahoma's Attorney General in 1994 and has deservedly been reelected 3 times. He served as president of the National Association of Attorneys General during the 2002-2003 cycle And in 1996, he was among those at the forefront of the landmark suit against big tobacco, and he was one of 8 attorney generals asked to serve on the negotiating team for the states. Drew has been a tireless advocate for ethics in government, zealously prosecuting public officials who have broken the law and misused government funds regardless of party or political affiliation. And in 2005, he started the case, which some of us know as the chicken poop case, but it is a case that he likes to refer to as Oklahoma's defense of its precious water resources by filing a suit against improper dumping of poultry litter, which has contaminated the Illinois River watershed. Together with his wife, Linda, who very much wanted to be here with us today, but is helping take care of 2 3-month-old twins, grandchildren. Together with his wife, Linda, Drew has become a national leader in issues related to end-of-life care, and Linda and Drew are champions of the Legal Aid Organization and its mission to provide equal access to justice. Drew Edmondson is an exceptional public servant. He has spent virtually his entire career in serving the greater good in Oklahoma and beyond, and he is a man with an unyielding commitment to decency, to doing that which is right rather than that which is politically expedient. It is my honor to introduce Drew Edmondson as our 2009 alumnus in residence.
Thank you, Dean Levitt, for that very generous introduction. It, of course, immediately reminded me of a story my dad used to tell about the lawyer who had the couple before him for a divorce. He said, "Okay, when did you all get married?" And he said, "We got married yesterday." "Got married yesterday? When'd you meet?" "The day before yesterday, and that's the most over-introduced man I ever met." So I kind of feel that way here today. I am honored to be in your company, and I am pleased to have an opportunity to visit with you at lunch. I want to thank Dean Levitt for arranging to have chicken served. My attitude is the more of them we can kill and eat, the better off we are, and so I appreciate your contribution to that effort. I appreciate Professor Butkin wearing a tie with elephants on it to make me feel welcome, although he told me they are Indian elephants and not American elephants. I'm not sure that's going to do any good. It's great to be back on campus, this campus which keeps changing. And I was driving down Delaware to make the turn back to the east to come to the law school. All of that on the west side of Delaware is brand new to me. Gorgeous buildings, doing wonderful things with the law school. Dean Levitt, I'm not sure when I was here that anyone who had me in class would have predicted that I would have done anything after graduating from law school. There is extant a photo in one of the bulletins for the law school, which may still exist in somebody's library somewhere, of a shot of students sitting around in the pit down there, and that is me with the long hair, beard, and wearing a serape. But I very much enjoyed my time at the Tulsa University School of Law. Enjoyed my time here. I had Professor Hicks for property, and learned for the first time to draw that square and find the southeast corner of the quarter of the southeast quarter of whatever, and I can do that to this day from what Professor Hicks taught me. I had Professor Hager for torts, and that beautiful portrait that's in the administrative offices is reminiscent of the good times I had learning about tort law. I remember one occasion when he was talking about the duty to help, and as we all know, typically you do not have a duty to help, and you're not liable as a bystander for allowing something to happen where someone gets injured. But if you take some action toward helping, and by doing so place a person at greater risk of injury or enhancing the injuries that they have, that you could then be liable even though you had no duty to do anything. And he was explaining that with the picture of someone in the middle of a lake drowning and you as a bystander. And he said, are you liable if you just stand there and watch them drown? And the answer was no. He said, well, what if you start swimming out there and as a result they stop struggling toward shore, relying on your coming to rescue them, and end up, you change your mind and go back and they drown? Mr. Edmondson. And I said, well, is there anyone else around the lake that might have helped in that situation? And Professor Hager said, no, just you. And I said, well, then there's no liability. And he said, why is that? And I said, no witnesses. It seemed to me a very practical answer to the question. There was a little silence in the room, and Professor Hager never cracked a smile, and he said, Miss Wilson. I came to law school actually not of my own volition. There's a story told about JFK when he was asked how he became a hero during World War II. He said, it was easy, they sank my boat, and which is pretty much how I ended up in law school. In 1976, I was a candidate for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District and was unsuccessful, and found myself in August unemployed and without prospects. I had 2 years previously taken the LSAT, which, by the way, back then had a totally different scoring system. I scored pretty well on the LSAT, but whatever score I had today sounds like just totally flunked. I don't remember what it was, but it was much lower than the scores that you get now. And I called up the Tulsa University Dean's office. I said, the school had already started. I said, you got any room left? And actually someone had dropped out, and they took that person's card and just scratched through their name and wrote mine in, and I became a student at TU Law School, and have never regretted it, and enjoyed the drive back and forth. If there are any of my professors still here, Professor Allison, I will admit now, that which you probably suspected at the time, that I always read the first case in the car on the way from Muskogee to the law school, and I figured if I knew the first case and got called on, I could answer, and if I didn't get called on, I'd be reading the second case as we went along, but managed to graduate in any event. I got admitted to the bar pro bono publico under that provision that says if you're working for a public defender or a district attorney, you can be admitted pending the results of the bar exam, and actually got sworn in as an attorney in Muskogee by the district judge before I ever passed the bar, and that was a good thing. In private practice for a while, and went back in as district attorney, and tried to put to work some of the things that I learned at the University of Tulsa from the professors and from my fellow students about the use of the law to do the public good, which is what pro bono publico really means, for the public good. Most of it think of it in terms of, well, I'm not going to get paid for this. I'm doing it pro bono, and that is also for the public good, because there's far more need for legal services than there are people who can afford legal services, and which parenthetically is why Linda and I got involved in the fundraising drive for Legal Services of Oklahoma this year, and at the end of the year had raised $727,000 for legal aid, surpassing barely the record that had been set by Mike Turpin and Burns Hargis the year before, which of course was our goal. And we did get that done. But I got to put that to work for a period of time in the district attorney's office with some of the things that we put into place, establishing a victim witness center for the first time, taking community sentencing and the requirement to perform community service, and instead of just adding that on to the judgment and sentence, actually making it a program where we tried to match up the deficits that the defendant had with some form of community service that might help him or her avoid committing offenses in the future. The most obvious example, if you had an offender who had not finished high school, the part of their community service would go get your GED. Go take the courses that are necessary to get a high school equivalency. If we had a drug or alcohol problem, part of the community service would be going to treatment and going to counseling to try to fix those underlying problems. It's one of the advantages of being married to a social worker. Linda helped me overcome my desire to put everybody in prison by saying that there might be an underlying problem here that we need to look at. I also learned a good sense of priorities in the district attorney's office, brought home to me when a deputy sheriff named Melvin Smith came in to talk to me about a burglary in Haskell in the west end of Muskogee County. And Melvin said, we had this burglary and I think it was committed by kids. I said, how do you know? And he said, well, one of them had to relieve himself outside the building and he cleaned himself up with his school papers and it's got his name on it. And I said, well, Melvin, did you seize a sample? And Melvin was a big fella. And he looked down at me and he said, what do you mean, did I seize a sample? I said, well, if you seized a sample, we take the suspect into custody, get a sample from him, send them both off to Tahlequah, the OSBI lab, and they can tell us whether there was a match. And you'll enjoy this, Tim. Melvin looked at me again for a long time, and he finally said, it wasn't that important a burglary. So you get a real sense for where the priorities are. When I went to the Attorney General's office, it was with, I thought, a fairly firm knowledge of what the AG did. I'd read every statute that referenced the Attorney General, but the statutes didn't do justice to the scope of what's involved, which Mike knows in the AG's office and which Robert knows as well. You deal with so many things and have so many opportunities that the statutes do not do justice to in their description. And one of the early things that we got involved in was mentioned in the introduction, and that's the litigation against the tobacco industry. This last weekend, I was at an AG meeting in San Diego, and I got to spend some time with Mike Moore, who's no longer in office, but he was the young AG from the state of Mississippi who filed the first lawsuit against the tobacco industry in 1994. I was in the process of running for the office, and John Nix knows this. We'd never heard of the tobacco litigation. We were all focused on death penalty. That was the big issue in Oklahoma. But this young AG in Mississippi would file the lawsuit, and keep in mind that nobody in the history of the world had ever won a lawsuit against the tobacco industry. They'd never settled. If anyone got a favorable judgment at the district court, they appealed it forever, and they'd never lost an appeal. So this was an industry that was unscathed by legal actions up until the 1990s. Mike Moore filed the lawsuit. I learned about it when I started going to AG meetings in December of 1994, and thereafter got more and more interested in it. And in 1996, Oklahoma joined in that litigation by filing a lawsuit in Cleveland County against the tobacco industry and the public relations firms that handled their media, where they told the American people there was no link between smoking and cancer. And we sued the law firms that had represented the tobacco industry and had taken the research from the tobacco industry itself and run them through the law offices as special projects, and from then on, the ones that showed that there was a link shielded them from discovery as attorney-client privilege. And those documents were not available to the public. Any of these litigants, any of these widows, any of these family members that had been suing the tobacco industry for decades had never seen these documents because they were shielded by attorney-client privilege. And I used to tell people an analogy that if someone comes into your law office and says, I just robbed a bank and I want you to represent me, that everything that person says to the lawyer is sacred, it's untouchable, it's privileged, and the lawyer cannot be forced to reveal any of those conversations. But if someone goes into a lawyer and says, I'm getting ready to rob the First National Bank, and I'd like to leave my gun here until it's time to pick it up, and after the robbery, I'd like you to hold the loot in your safe until the robbery's over and we'll give you 10% for doing that, that person is no longer a lawyer. That person is a bank robber, and he is liable for prosecution just as the others are. Our allegation was that these law firms were part of a conspiracy to withhold evidence by shielding it as attorney-client privilege, and they were sued as well. The best thing that happened after the successful negotiation of that lawsuit in November of 1998 was what I had the privilege of joining with Robert Butkin to do in the general election 2 years later. And that was to submit to the voters of the state of Oklahoma a constitutional amendment to make sure that the monies that were received in that settlement went into a trust, that only the interest could be spent, and it must be spent on what the lawsuit was about, and that's the health of the people of the state of Oklahoma. And by a 2-to-1 margin, the voters in November of 2000 approved that constitutional amendment. And today there are hundreds of millions of dollars at work for the health of the people of the state of Oklahoma that cannot be rated, that cannot be taken by the legislature and spent on roads or corrections or anything else. It must be spent on the public health. I'd like you to join me in thanking Robert for his excellent work on getting that done. We did a similar thing a few years later with something called the Oklahoma Education Technology Trust, when Southwestern Bell was talking about opting into a different method of regulation. And the Corporation Commission said you have to demonstrate your commitment to the state of Oklahoma, and they could have done any number of things. They could have improved their infrastructure, their wires, or whatever. We asked them, because of a study that showed that Oklahoma was ranked 44th in the nation in our ability to compete in the global marketplace. And then one of the reasons we ranked 44th in the nation was because we ranked 50th in access to computer technology and the knowledge of teachers in our public schools on how to use computers as a learning device, and that brought our score down. We combined those two factors and asked Southwestern Bell to put $30 million into an Oklahoma Technology Trust so we could start putting smart boards into our schools across the state of Oklahoma. The board is educators, not legislators, educators. It is shielded from political influence. The money is given out on the basis of need, and since 2001, we have trained 1,072 administrators. We have trained 3,200 teachers on how to use the equipment. We have reached 46,709 students across the state of Oklahoma in 115 schools. We've spent $8.8 million on smart boards, software, and other equipment in order to teach kids how to learn computers. We spent $8.8 million on a $30 million investment and still have $33 million in the bank. That is the kind of long-term thinking and pro bono publico work that you have an opportunity to do in the Attorney General's office and in your practice here in Tulsa or across the state of Oklahoma. And that's what we're trying to do with the Illinois River. They tell me that if we are totally successful, if we stop the surface application of poultry waste within the Illinois River watershed, that the day will come in not too long a time when the Illinois River and the Barren Fork and Flint Creek and the other Peach Eater Creek and the other tributaries will start looking like they did in the 1960s. That won't take so very long. But the reclamation of Lake Tenkiller, which all those rivers fed into, honestly will not happen in my lifetime. So that is a project that we're engaged in not for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children, literally for the public good, literally to preserve an asset for future generations. And we can do this, Kelly Birch, because we're lawyers. We can do this because we've been taught how to do it at Tulsa University School of Law. We can do this because it's in our blood to do it, because of what we've learned and what we know and the love that we have for this state. I'm going to conclude with a flurry of plagiaristic bravado. 3 short quotations, one that is one of my wife's favorites, one that's one of my favorites, and one that I heard this morning on the History Channel as they were doing a story about the Peace Corps. Margaret Mead, this is Linda's, said, "Never doubt that one committed individual can change the world. Indeed, that's the only way that it's ever been done." My favorite is a quotation from Robert F. Kennedy, and he gave this speech in Cape Town, South Africa in 1966 at the time of apartheid. He said, "Let no one be discouraged by the enormity of the world's ills, violence, misery, and disease, or the feeling that there's little one person can do to change events. Few of us will have the ability to bend history, but each of us can affect a small portion of events, and in the sum total of all of our work will be written the history of a generation." And the third, which I heard on the History Channel, was from Edward Everett Hale. And he said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something in our lives, in our practices, in our work. Pro bono publico, for the public good. Be a lawyer." Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Drew, for that message, which I think is so poignant, especially at this moment that we're in our state and in our country. As a 2009 alumnus in residence, you are truly, truly a treasured member of the TU College of Law family, and I'm proud to present you with just a few tokens of appreciation. The first, our president, President Stedman Upham. It's a book that he wrote on the portraiture of Edward Sheriff Curtis. He really wanted to be here today but was traveling, so we present this to you. And also, to add to a wall that I'm sure is filled with a lot of history of your own career and your accomplishments, we just have a plaque to commemorate you being our alumnus in residence this year. And we really thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences and sharing your time with our students and our entire community. You're truly, truly just a great public servant to the state and to this nation.